liaison with Health and Human Services and the team that Senator Daschle has put together to address this issue. I will also, and without recognizing everybody, and Ken can do that, you should know that over the course of today, the command center here, and that's exactly what it is, pulling together law enforcement and public health, includes a broad range of people, experts in the field, including the CDC, Dr. Rima Kabaz, Deputy Director of the Division of Viral Disease, National Center for Infectious Disease, has been with us all day. Larry Siegel, who is to my left, Senior Deputy Director for Medical Affairs from the District of Columbia, because it's not just the capital that we focus on, because all of us live in the area around here. Roger Gibbs, who's with us, who is really overseeing the surveillance and the sampling across the Capitol as part of this team, program manager from DARPA, which all of you know is Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and a number of other people that we can mention. But I think the most useful thing is to turn it to Ken and have him summarize as of where we are today. Let me just say that you don't have all the answers at any one point in time. It's evolving. We have a seminal event which testing has to be done. How wide you test, you make an initial decision. Based on the data that unfolds over time, you reassess 6 hours later as to whether or not to extend that perimeter, make different recommendations about treatment and about testing. And based on the information that comes tomorrow morning or the next day, it'll be changing, so get used to that. All the cultures aren't in yet, so get used to that. You'll hear things about false negatives, false positives. Don't worry about the details of the science. All of this has been worked out through our public health infrastructure, through our system. They're experts at it. We've got the best epidemiologists in the United States of America focusing on this issue. I say all that to be reassuring, but also because you are the media and people who are listening want answers right now, and we don't have all the answers. We'll get the answers. We'll get to the root of it, in both in terms of intelligence and also the public health. But I think, Ken, let me turn to you. The focus of this meeting is on public health. Ken.
As many of you are aware, for the last couple of days there have been teams of investigators assisting here in evaluating the recent exposure. At this time, nasal swab analysis indicates that the exposure has been confined to a very specific area of the heart building. We've broadened out our analysis after the initial nasal swab, and as we have broadened out our analysis, we have found that there have been no other positive samples to date. 31 people have shown the presence of spores, 5 law enforcement, 3 in Senator Feingold's office, and the balance in Senator Daschle's office. Because of that scientific evidence, the Centers for Disease Control epidemiologists advise that there is no further need for further testing after today. Only those individuals who worked in or visited the 5th or the 6th floor southeast wing of the Senate Heart Building on Monday should receive the entire 60-day course of antibiotics. With regard to the environment, at this time, there has been no evidence of spores in the ventilation system. We continue to evaluate both the medical as well as the environmental status, and as was mentioned before, we will bring you back information as it becomes available. Thank you very much.
I do think that we want to mention the mailroom.
Yes, sir. With regard to the mailroom, among the various tests that were done, there was a single test which appeared to be positive, and because of that, the mailroom also has been placed off limits. We continue to assess that aspect of the building.
We have our bank of experts who are here to answer questions to the best of our ability.
Dr., a very specific question that we talked about earlier in the hall, the size of the spores, which is a critical question here. What can you tell us about that?
Today, as we walk the halls, the big issue among most of you, and I guess America, because the threshold's been raised, is this whole question of weaponization of anthrax, of virulence of anthrax. And the issue was raised yesterday. It took on a life of its own over the course of the night and then today. And then I know in certain hearings, certain statements have been made. We've had General Parker, who you heard from today, and in the briefings of the leadership by General Parker, who has actually looked under the microscope, today the following can be said, that he saw no other vegetative growth, that these particles, and he used the words garden variety, all of which I believe are very reassuring. There is question of uniformity of the spores themselves, and that has not been settled, and we've not been briefed, and people will continue to investigate on this sort of intelligence FBI arm. The specimens themselves have gone through the testing at Fort Detrick through General Parker's expertise, using standard immunofluorescent testing, looking under the microscope, through polymerase chain reaction, through ELISA tests, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays, all of which has given certain information, but at this juncture that it has been sent off to other laboratories in the country for further analysis. And you will not hear statements from the FBI or from any of us beyond that. The questions are how uniform, we can't answer that. Particle size, around the 1 to 2 to 3 micron level, you know, it's easier to what's called aerosolize the particles, but we have no evidence that this is necessarily across the board of that small size. The good news, and the good news you heard today, is that this bug, this bacteria that has a shell or a spore around it, is sensitive to every single antibiotic for which it was tested. That's penicillin, tetracycline, doxycycline, the fluoroquinolones, Cipro. And that's good news. And that means this thing is imminently treatable. And as we look at the public health side, this arm over here that I'm talking about, it's very reassuring because it doesn't have to be Cipro, it can be penicillin, of this range of antibiotics. Now, weaponization doesn't mean anything to a physician, to a medical scientist. It doesn't mean anything. It's sort of taken on a life in terms of weaponization. We can't answer the question, but things like purity will be looked at, uniformity will be looked at, what agents it's mixed with will be looked at, what agents are used in growing this will be looked at, and whether or not it's sensitive to antibiotics will be looked at. The presence of plasmids will be looked at. It will be looked at. We do not have that information as of today.
Let me just, I'd like to, Dr. Frist has given us a very thorough answer. Let me, in much more layman terms, say two things. First, in all the briefings that I have been in attendance, not once has anyone used the term weapons grade. Secondly, in all of the meetings in which I have been in attendance, every reference to this bacteria has been, just as Dr. Frist said, it is treatable. I think those are the two most important things I hope you all will hear. We've not been briefed on any weapons grade reference, and secondly, it is treatable.
It sounded the alarm that it was a very serious strain yesterday, and in fact, the House people are saying that you're the one that got past it all, freaked out, so we had to send everybody home.
I do that to people. What can I say?
No, less severe than you thought yesterday. That's my question. Is it less serious than you thought yesterday?
I'm not the expert on any one of these issues. Obviously, you've got Dr. Frist and this whole bank of highly qualified people. What I heard yesterday was especially the aerosolization of the product is one that I think caused people to be more concerned. Because it is so aerosolable, it is something that will have...
What are we going to do with the audio?
Again, there's nothing that we...
Obviously, we're having some technical problems over here. Senator Tom Daschle briefing reporters, together with Senator Bill Frist of Tennessee, himself a medical doctor, Senator Trent Lott, the minority leader of the Senate, telling reporters, telling all of us who have been watching that so far they've only confirmed 100% that there was some anthrax in the Hart Senate office building, in the office of the Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, and some next door in Senator Feingold's office. In the Dirksen Senate office building, in the mailroom, one initial test showed some positive spores in the mailroom next door to the Hart office building. Senator Frist and Senator Daschle, as well as the Deputy Surgeon General of the United States, insisting that the anthrax that was discovered is, in their words, treatable. Senator Frist saying everything is under control, everyone will be okay. In his words, a garden variety type of anthrax was discovered. Now, 31 people so far have tested positive for anthrax exposure. 5 law enforcement Capitol Hill police officers, 3 staffers who work for Senator Feingold, and 23 staffers who work for Senator Daschle. No evidence of spores in the ventilation system in those Senate office buildings, according to the Deputy Surgeon General. And one additional point that they kept referring to, that all of the anthrax is susceptible to the antibiotics, not only the Cipro, which has been so widely publicized in recent days, but penicillin and other antibiotics as well. I guess if Jonathan Karl is there, is Jonathan Karl is there? Not there. Let's go to Dr. Victor Cohen of the Maimonides Medical Center in New York, who himself is an expert on infectious diseases. First of all, what you heard right now, Dr. Cohen, at this news conference, what does it all say to you?
Well, it basically tells me that it's being contained, that it's not in the ventilation system, which is very positive. It may be associated with the letters and the management of the letters that may have been associated with some form of aerosolization. And in addition, the nasal swabs realized that it takes 8,000 to 50,000 spores to truly cause the symptoms. And the fact is that we've been able to identify it quickly, and now the antibiotic therapy can initiate and basically be treating these patients. And therefore, it's very safe at this point and very positive news.
Okay, Dr. Cohen, please stand by. I want to bring you back, but I think we fixed our audio problems at a news conference. Let's go back, listen to the Deputy Surgeon General.
A couple hundred people here?
We are talking probably about a couple of hundred people, yes.
If those tests come back negative, I guess tomorrow and the next day, you still expect those people to be on a 60-day residence?
Yes, we do. In an abundance of caution, we believe, looking at it from an epidemiological standpoint, that it is the prudent direction.
And can I ask a question here? We've got a lot of examples of the agencies involved. It would be really good to know what role everybody's playing in the response. And then how you're going to clean up the offices that will be contaminated. If one particular agency will be, if there is any sort of skills needed for that, one particular agency that can take care of it.
I can begin to address that if I could. And that is that the response that is occurring here in this situation is truly a multiple departmental response. The Department of Health and Human Services is very much involved here in providing whatever assistance we can provide. The District of Columbia Health Department is also here. The Department of Defense has provided additional resources and analysis as well. And this is only to identify a small number of agencies that are working here in collaboration and in partnership.
Let me just very quickly, and then we'll answer. Roger Gibbs has been at this for about 30 years. This is what he does every day. He's program manager from DARPA. He was on, before all of this even hit, he was in both the mailroom and around doing this. And Roger, why don't you take the question, which basically is overall surveillance, what's being done, and then secondly, how is decontamination carried out, and then after it's carried out, do you have to worry about anything?
Who does it?
Okay, let me address that real quick. I think we touched on this earlier today and said that the FBI did the initial, was called in initially after the Capitol Police had verified from the samples in the room. We've now transitioned beyond that. We don't need the Capitol Police taking additional samples. FBI has released it as a crime scene. So now we're in the cleanup phase, DOD is going to coordinate those efforts for the additional sampling and the cleanup. We will have the Environmental Protection Agency, the same folks who have been working down in Florida, helping us with the decontamination. We're going to have the NIOSH portion of CDC providing the surveillance for us, both air samples and surface samples. So that's the way we've divided this effort up at this stage.
Can I ask a question, Senator? Perhaps somebody can address this. For a layman's perspective, how did 25 or 31 people get exposed? You've ruled out so far, or you haven't ruled out, but there's no evidence of exposure in the ventilation system. Clearly 31 people didn't handle the letter. So can somebody help out how the exposure happened?
Yeah, again, real basic. Anthrax, bacteria, spore around it. 3 different kinds of disease. It's not different bacteria. It can either go in the air, in which case it can deposit in the nose or go down in the lungs. It can be through a cut on the skin, or it can be ingested in food of some sort. Those are the 3 ways. The nasal swabs, the 31 tests that you heard about today, and again, there may be more. Again, this was the first day. We'll have results back the next day and the next day, and don't be alarmed. Just almost expect there may be a few more. That simply is an environmental test. You don't have the disease. These 31 people are not infected. They don't have disease. They're not sick. It doesn't mean they'll get the disease. What it means is in the environment, number 1, aerosolization, air, that there were spores deposited in the nose. Therefore, they're going to be treated because they were in an environment where those spores were for 60 days. What was the question beyond that? No, so it has to be in the air in some way. Is there any disagreement to that? It has to be in the air in some way. The aerosolization of anthrax, as Senator Daschle mentioned, is something that a lot of people focus on. You have to get these particles down from a bunch of microns of the size, a bunch of microns down to 1 or 2 microns for them to get from stay in the air for a period of time, and in the nose, and then on down into the lungs. So somewhere or another, it's in the air. Does anybody disagree? Of these 31 people that we've seen.
Well, was it on both floors, for instance? You have a 2-floor suite, 5th and 6th floor. Were the 31 people, some of them on one floor and some of them on the other floor?
I would also add to that, from what I understand, I think there was some transfer of this from one person to the other on people's clothing. In other words, it was affixed to the clothing of one member of the staff. I know that after this all occurred, there were some hugs that you'd expect, and people were hugging each other. And I think maybe in that effort, there could have been the transfer from one person to the next as well. That also, I'm told, can occur. Do you want to add to that?
I'd like to add to the Senator's response there. One, it's our understanding that there's an open stairwell in the Senator's suite, and also under the normal course of air movement in and out of doors, it's possible for the organism, the spores, to move around in a building. And that's the reason why in doing the analysis, the epidemiological analysis, we identified the 5th and 6th floors based upon the mapping of where these individuals, the 31 who showed a positive nasal swab, were located.
Dr. Ken Moritsugu, the Deputy Surgeon General of the United States, together with Senator Daschle, Senator Lott, Senator Frist, briefing reporters, briefing all of us on the latest anthrax exposures in the U.S. Senate. The point they're making is that the situation, in their words, is under control. The anthrax is eminently treatable. There are these 31 positive exposures that have come through, and those individuals will be getting 60 days of the Cipro, the antibiotic, which should do the job. We're going to continue our coverage, speak to Dr. Kenneth Cohen, an expert on infectious diseases, get some perspective, and the rest of the day's developments when we come back.
In the stock market, there's some terrible weeks, some terrible months, some terrible days. We've had some bad things in the past, and we've recovered from all of them. I mean, this is a tough time. We have one of the worst events in the history of this country, combined with a slowdown in the economy. We have a lot of buffers in the economy. A lot of strong elements like Social Security payments are wonderful, unemployment compensation is great. The federal government's running a massive surplus. 69% of people own their homes, in general. Housing prices are very firm. They've been up strongly the last 3 years. This helps the economy. I've been looking at stocks for over 35 years professionally. This is not the scariest time I've gone through. I can't predict the future. I've never even tried to do it. Predicting the next 1,000, 2,000 points is futile. But all I know is we've had 9 recessions since World War II. We've had 9 recoveries since World War II. We've had a perfect score. Betting against America has been a bad bet in the past. It's going to be a bad bet in the future.
If you have osteoarthritis, you owe it to yourself to learn about Celebrex. Celebrex specifically targets only the COX-2 enzyme, a key source of arthritis pain. Celebrex relieves arthritis pain, plus inflammation and stiffness too. Celebrex should not be taken if you've had aspirin-sensitive asthma or allergic reactions due to aspirin or other arthritis medicines, or certain drugs called sulfonamides. In rare cases, serious stomach problems, such as bleeding, can occur without warning. Tell your doctor if you have kidney or liver problems. Powerful 24-hour relief from osteoarthritis pain, inflammation, and stiffness. Ask your doctor about Celebrex, the #1 selling brand of prescription arthritis medicine.
Welcome back. With all the fears over anthrax and biological terrorism, should we be stocking up on antibiotics? For some perspective on that issue, we're joined once again by Dr. Victor Cohen, the Chief of Emergency Pharmacology at Maimonides Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York. Dr. Cohen, what about the whole issue of stocking up for the potential of bioterrorism? Should people rush out to their drugstores and get Cipro, penicillin, other antibiotics?
Absolutely not. We don't recommend it. And in addition, there is an enormous number of agents available for this incident. We have enough Cipro, we have enough doxycycline. The government has push-pack systems that are capable of bringing down 50,000 tons worth of Cipro, doxycycline, and amoxicillin. And there are other alternatives, even if these are not available or if the species is resistant to these. So at this point, the question, the real risk is the risk of side effects, and when this agent's overused is the risk of resistance, where other organisms may not react or not be susceptible to Cipro or some of the other agents able to be used for anthrax.
Dr. Cohen, what about those 31 individuals on Capitol Hill who have tested positive in their nasal swabs for the exposure to anthrax? They're now going to be on Cipro for 60 days. Will they be able to go about their jobs, their day-to-day activities during those 60 days?
Absolutely. Cipro is usually used for urinary tract infections for about 14 days, and it's quite safe. Studies show Cipro can be utilized for that long, and it is safe. Side effects that can occur are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, possibly headache as well. And there's sometimes, if you don't drink enough water, you can have crystals form in your urine. But usually, if you follow the correct directions in terms of using Cipro, you'll be fine. If you can't take Cipro because maybe you have an allergic reaction to it, you can take doxycycline, and doxycycline is very effective, is as effective as Cipro, and it's actually cheaper. So therefore, you can also use doxycycline for the 60 days. And if all else fails, you can use penicillin, so long as you're not allergic to penicillin as well.
We noticed that yesterday when those 1,000 people were given those preliminary tests, the nasal swabs, they were given 3-day supplies of Cipro and told take these for 3 days. What happens if they just take them for 3 days and then they stop? Any negative side effects as a result of that?
No, there isn't. The whole plan is if you test positive, you should continue the therapy for the 60 days, for the full course, because that's how it's been studied. And we have found that you will have long-term survival with using the 60-day therapy. It hasn't been studied for 3 days, and that's why we don't recommend it for only 3-day therapy, unless you test negative. If you're negative, once you test negative, it's okay to inevitably discontinue therapy.
So you shouldn't finish out the full run of the prescription. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Unless, again, unless symptoms do, or you feel symptoms abruptly onset coming, and that you would have to return to your physician at that point.
And what would be the major symptom that our viewers probably be interested in knowing? What should they be looking for?
Well, cough is the classic symptom. You can also have fever, malaise, and weakness are the classic symptoms, very similar to the flu, except you won't probably have as much of the nasal feelings of the flu, but you will have cough as the classic symptom. Cutaneously, you will have an oval or blister-like lesion that will form over the next 2 days into from a red to a vesicular, sort of what you see in chicken pox, but only one, and then it will blacken, sort of like an S-char, what we call a black S-char, and then basically that forms into a scab, and that scab usually is self-limited unless you have, unless there is a risk for injecting yourself with it, sort of subcutaneous injection, and it getting into your bloodstream, and that's where it could cause a similar reaction or a disseminated reaction into your body.
Dr. Cohen, thanks for your useful advice. We appreciate it very much. And for those of our viewers who want to learn more about all of this, you can go to my website, cnn.com/Wolf. Read my daily online column there as well. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we'll check in with our senior White House correspondent, John King. He's traveling with President Bush on the way to China right now. We'll check in with John when we come back.
I know something of attraction. I know something of power. The new car, I think it knows too.
The all-new Lexus ES300, a new world of luxury.
Too many high-interest monthly payments? Why not pay them off with a second mortgage with a no-closing cost option from Ditech.com? Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED. And there is no equity required. Ditech's second mortgage with a no-closing cost option can help you to consolidate your high-interest debts into one low monthly payment. It's smart money from Ditech.com. Apply online now or call us at 1-800-71-FIXED.
It's easy to take electricity for granted. A lot of us aren't even sure where it comes from. So we're sometimes surprised to learn that over half of the electricity we use comes from coal.
Mrs. Wimmer!
And thanks to a $50 billion investment in clean coal technologies by America's electric utilities that use coal, it's getting cleaner every day, helping us protect something we can't take for granted. Our environment.
Hello, Mrs. Lindsay. William?
Hello, Stephen.
You're not by any chance computer shopping, are you?
Mm-hmm. If I can get some help.
Well, right now, you can get a complete Dell system with an Intel Pentium 4 processor, which is so nice, for only $899.
Really?
She's intrigued. Excellent. Because right now, you can get free shipping. Unbelievable. And as far as service and support, Dell's won more awards than any other PC company in the last 5 years. Just call or go online. Tell them what you want, and right to your front door comes America's favorite PC.
Thanks, Stephen.
Now you can get a Dell desktop with an Intel Pentium 4 processor, which delivers performance where you need it most. And 6 months of DellNet by MSN Internet access for just $8.99. Call or go online today, and shipping is free. There's great deals on notebooks, too.
Dude, you're getting a Dell.
Easy to buy, easy to own, easy as Dell.
Welcome back. President Bush is now on his way to China to attend an economic summit in Shanghai. He left just a short while ago from California. Before his departure, the president spoke to Air Force men and women at Travis Air Force Base. CNN senior White House correspondent John King is traveling with the president. He'll be leaving in a little while. John, first of all, give us the reaction from the White House to these latest developments, the increased anthrax exposures here in Washington?
Well, the president was informed last night of word that so many of those staffers in Senator Tom Daschle's office were exposed to anthrax. The president keeping track of developments here as he traveled here to California today. Wolf, of course, the anthrax scare, one reason many question whether the president should take this trip at all. Another, the ongoing military campaign overseas. But Mr. Bush making the case here at his stop in California before heading on to China that this was a critical trip. While in Shanghai, he will meet with the leaders of China and Russia. He will speak to the leaders of Japan and South Korea, all critical countries, he says, in number one, the financial crackdown on terrorism, freezing and seizing the assets of terrorist groups. So Mr. Bush making clear in a speech here in California, he views this trip as critical to not only strengthening, but perhaps expanding the global coalition to fight terrorism.
But the main thing that will be on my mind is to continue to rally the world against terrorists. It's to remind people that it happened to us, sure, but it could happen to them as well. It's to remind them that evil knows no borders, no boundaries, and remind them that we must take a stand. That those of us who've been given the responsibility of high office must not shirk from our duty. That now is the time to claim freedom for future generations.
In an earlier speech to business leaders in Sacramento, Mr. Bush said the trip also critical as he tries to work out new trade agreements around the world, new efforts to give the global economy a boost. But in that speech, Mr. Bush used his most explicit language yet in making clear one major goal of the U.S. military strikes is to help the Northern Alliance and other opposition forces within Afghanistan.
We're paving the way for friendly troops to defeat the Taliban and root out the al-Qaeda parasites that the Taliban hosts and protects. We're enforcing the doctrine that says this: if you harbor the terrorists, you are guilty of terror, and like the terrorists, you will be held responsible.
Fighter jets flying over above us here. It might be difficult to hear me, Wolf. The president also in a roundtable with Asian editors making clear, again, this will be a long campaign. He said, quote, "You mark my words, people are going to get tired of the war on terrorism. And by the way, it may take more than 2 years." But in that interview and in his remarks here today, the president once again saying, even if the American public grows tired, he will press on with that war, once again using the words, "I will not waver." Wolf.
John, we hear you just fine despite those planes flying over your head. But explain to our viewers what the president meant when he said that the U.S. will will work with friendly forces. Was that a specific endorsement of the Northern Alliance, the anti-Taliban force in northern Afghanistan? And how does that fit into what Secretary of State Powell said this week, that the U.S. might be willing to find a role for so-called moderate Taliban representatives in a new government in Afghanistan?
Well, the administration makes clear it is not just supporting the Northern Alliance, but some of those military strikes, especially just outside of the capital of Kabul and elsewhere in northern Afghanistan, clearly have helped strategically the Northern Alliance campaign in the north. There are some other militias in the south and elsewhere that the administration says can also move on Taliban forces, perhaps. So the administration not explicitly endorsing the Northern Alliance, but certainly helping it. And as you noted, it is a sensitive matter. Pakistan, for one, does not want the Northern Alliance to be the predominant party in any new government in Afghanistan. So Secretary Powell saying all would be welcome. There should be some form of a coalition, opening the door even to some moderate members of the Taliban. This right now, a theory, if you will. The military campaign goes on, but the Bush administration asking the former king of Afghanistan as well as the United Nations to take a much more active role and to move more quickly now as the strikes continue to try to form some kind of a coalition that could, emphasis on could, replace the Taliban.
John King in California getting ready to board a press charter flight to fly to Shanghai, catch up with the president in China. Thanks once again for joining us. Have a safe trip yourself. And up next, making the workplace secure. An expert takes your online chat questions at cnn.com/community. Go there.
WBT Live at 9 and a special report with Aaron Brown at 10. Depend on CNN.
If you had your own movie theater, what kinds of movies would you show?
Use your imagination. I'd show my kinds of stories. Great dramas.
Stories that are true to life.
And don't forget romances and stars.
Bring in Madonna!
Welcome to Lifetime Movie Network, with your kind of movies showing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Lifetime Movie Network. Your movie's on.
All that glitters is gold. It shines through in every one of our dependable, long-lasting Chevy trucks. During Truck Month, keep America rolling and get S10 with 500 cash back or Silverado with 1,000 cash back and 0% APR financing on S10 or Silverado. That's cash back and 0% APR on S10 and Silverado. Only offers this good on trucks this durable. Get the gold bow tie. Truck Month during Indiana bonus days at your local Chevy dealer.
Choosing the right Medicare supplement plan is so important, but it can be confusing. I needed answers to several questions, and I found them in this Guide to Health Insurance for People with Medicare. It's available absolutely free. I learned how Medicare supplement policies give you the freedom to choose the doctors and hospitals you want, and how once the policy is issued, your coverage can never be canceled. Call for your free Medicare supplement guide today.
To receive your free guide, call 1-800-457-4102.
The Rug Merchant semi-annual sale has begun and is going to be bigger than ever. We have just returned from the rug markets where we purchased an incredible selection of hand-woven Oriental rugs from around the world. Also included in this year's sale are all of our Karastan rugs, contemporary rugs, hooked rugs, and stair runners. Create the warmth and beauty that your home or office deserves with an area rug from the Rug Merchant. So bring in your fabrics and let our expert staff help you select the rug of your dreams.
Depend on CNN.
Welcome back. Fears of terrorism can cause major disruptions for companies, of course. Let's go live to Joey Chen in Atlanta for some perspective on this. Joey?
Well, we have an interactive chat underway at cnn.com/community right now on the specific issue, the subject of security in the workplace. With us now to answer your questions on that issue is Bruce Blythe. He's the CEO of Crisis Management International. Bruce, we appreciate your being with us. Let's get right to questions that we're getting from our web chat audience right now. If we can bring up the first question for Bruce. I don't see it there, but oh, here we go. La Mirada, California asks, what is the most practical, simplest safety step we can take in the workplace?
Well, our company, Crisis Management International, specializes in the human side of crisis. And we've helped over 200 companies in New York and Washington, D.C. and all across the country. So we are familiar with the things that corporate leaders are doing now.
So, but what do you tell workers? I mean, how do you tell them? What do you tell them to do? The best thing we can do to protect ourselves as workers?
Well, I think the first thing is that there's a couple of issues. One is that there's a real issue that is going on, and that is that there is some exposure to terrorism now. The other thing is that there's a perceived threat out there right now that people are having, and I think corporate leaders at this point in time need to communicate to their employees with information and education about what they are doing, and if in fact there is exposure, what do they need to recognize, and what do they need to do if they feel like they are exposed.
All right, we've got another question here from the web chat audience from Sacramento, California, where the president has been this afternoon. How many companies know whether their central incoming air duct is protected from outsiders?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
How many companies know whether their central incoming air duct is protected from outsiders? I guess it speaks to the kind of fears people have. Are companies under an obligation to know, here are the sources, here are the places where something bad could be introduced into our air system, for example?
Well, what I hear you saying is that that outsiders, what we can do to keep from outsiders coming in and how to protect ourselves from that?
Sure, yeah.
Well, one of the things is that certainly corporate leaders need to take physical security measures. For example, they need to harden their buildings to make sure that their bombs cannot be placed in dumpsters, in boxes, that sort of thing. To control their areas of ingress and egress, to make sure that people aren't coming in that shouldn't be in. And to tell employees, give them a sense of control, to let them know that not to piggyback, not to let other people in. It's a polite thing to do, but in these cases, let's don't let the people in that we don't know into our workplace.
We can't be that loose. I just need to get a quick question to you. It really does pertain to all of us in any workplace, but I am wondering what your perspective is on this. How confident are we about these security guards in workplaces? Right, I mean, this is a question from Atlanta, Georgia. It seems to me that every company now seems to have security all over the place. I'm not sure how much of that security is really qualified at this point, and what limit do you say? Does every store, does every office need to have a guard in it? Should it be armed?
Well, I think, again, we're dealing with perception here as well as reality. The overwhelming probability is that any given employee or work unit is not going to be affected by terrorism in reality. The perception, though, is that people are afraid, and many times security guards are set up there to help with the perception that our workplace is safer, and also to let people know if there's somebody suspicious coming around, that sort of thing. But I think employees can certainly be eyes and ears for each other. This helps them have a better sense of control. But as much as security guards are important, they have their place. I think there's also, it's important that employees know that they need to know where they can tell somebody. They need to have a threat notification system, for example, on what to do if, in fact, they see somebody suspicious or a suspicious package, and what to do if they feel threatened.
Bruce Blythe, Crisis Management International is his company. We appreciate your being with us and giving us answers for our web chat audience. And Wolf, those folks at CNN.com/community are still talking about this important issue.
Thank you very much, Joey, and it was important joining us now for more on this entire anthrax investigation. CNN's bioterrorism analyst, Javed Ali. Javed, we've been reporting, as you heard on this program, that the preliminary test results are in from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, showing that the strain of anthrax discovered in the letter mailed to Tom Brokaw at NBC News, the same kind of anthrax that was delivered to the American media, the Supermarket tabloid publication building in Boca Raton, Florida. What does that say to you?
It suggests, and this is just an inference, but it's a suggestion that the source from New York and the source from Florida are the same. So whether the group or the individuals, whomever sponsored these incidents, it could possibly tie back to just one possible source instead of multiple sources.
And so and we don't know, obviously, at this point where those sources are, but you heard the news conference. Senator Daschle and his colleagues had the Deputy Surgeon General, 31 individuals so far exposed, but they also made a point of saying this was a garden-style variety of anthrax. Yesterday we heard weaponized, professional. What does that mean?
There may have been, or appears to be, some confusion with respect to identifying precisely what type of, what was the quality of this material. And I think some of that confusion may have been generated because you have more information today than we had yesterday. But with respect to the garden-style issue, I think what that refers to is the fact that this is a naturally occurring strain, and I'm not sure what that strain is, but naturally occurring strain, whether that strain is naturally occurring to the United States or another part of the world.
Well, yesterday you heard the widely reported suspicion, because it was supposedly a very precise strain, that it was in effect weaponized and could only have been made by a state sponsor of terrorism.
I wouldn't at this point draw that conclusion at this point, because we just don't have enough information as to what was the property of the material, how was the sort of organism generated in this powder, what were other sort of technical issues with respect to, consistency, concentration, things of that.
So even though 31 people have been exposed, they seem to be ratcheting down the threat concern. That would be my impression.
Right, and I think that is a good thing at this point. That's a positive development.
Okay, Javed Ali, our CNN bioterrorism analyst, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have, but I'll be back in 1 hour with much more coverage of the anthrax investigations. I'll also get perspective from the former CIA director, James Woolsey. Until then, thanks very much for watching. For Joey Chen, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. CNN's coverage of America's new war continues next with Lou Dobbs.
Here's one beautiful solution to the energy problem. It's what lies beneath this pristine path, snaking through the Wasatch Mountains of Utah. Williams Pipeline, delivering the natural gas of the Rockies to power generators of the West. And in between, 1,000 miles of nothing to see, except one beautiful energy solution.
There have been hundreds of civilian casualties. Well, now the Pentagon admits that stray bombs have hit civilian areas. And CNN Pentagon correspondent Jamie McIntyre has more on that.
The Pentagon continues to pound Taliban forces from the air. This truck convoy carrying fuel, an example of the ability of U.S. pilots to hit moving targets when they spot them. Pentagon videos show direct hits on a Taliban command post and a tank near Mazar-e-Sharif, where the U.S. is trying to help the Northern Alliance take the town from the Taliban's Fifth Corps.
We know that that's having an effect and an impact on the corps. Whether or not that is having a direct impact into the North Alliance movement is not yet clear, certainly not to me.
The Pentagon is also owning up to a couple of mistakes. Sunday, a U.S. Navy F-14 dropped 2 500-pound bombs on a residential area northwest of Kabul, near a village where the Taliban claim more than 20 civilian deaths. The same day, an F-18 missed a vehicle storage building on a military compound near Herat. The Pentagon didn't release any pictures, but says the 1,000-pound bomb hit within 300 feet of a senior citizen's home in the compound, which may have been used as a hospital.
As we always say, we regret any loss of civilian life. U.S. forces are intentionally striking only military and terrorist targets. We take great care in our targeting process to avoid civilian casualties.
The Pentagon also said a landing gear displayed by the Taliban did come from last week's commando raid, sheared off when a low-flying MH-47 helicopter hit something as it carried troops out of Afghanistan at top speed. It landed safely. In response to the non-stop attacks, Pentagon officials say the Taliban are beginning to disperse and show signs they may soon hide weapons and troops near mosques or civilian buildings, especially in urban areas where the U.S. says it won't bomb.
There is not an intention to open or widen attacks into cities. We will find other ways, as the chairman has said, using the full spectrum capability of our military to get at those who might cowardly decide to hide in residential neighborhoods.
The clear implication is that the Pentagon is planning more commando-style raids to deny the Taliban safe harbor even in their traditional urban strongholds, and that the United States is willing to pay the almost certain price of urban combat, higher casualties. Jamie McIntyre, CNN, The Pentagon.
We want to let you know that CNN is unable to independently verify the Taliban claims that dozens and perhaps hundreds of civilians have been killed in airstrikes. Our Afghan staff members went to a hospital in Kandahar, and they did see several bodies and wounded people, but our people were only allowed to go into areas designated by the Taliban. Our Nick Robertson is following the developments from neighboring Pakistan, and he joins us from Islamabad. Nick, hello.
Well, hello, Darren. We are and have been able last night to get the first information about military casualties inside Afghanistan. A militant Islamic Kashmiri freedom fighting group, Haqqat-ul-Mujahideen, that has close ties with the Taliban and is normally to be found fighting in that disputed region between Pakistan and India, the region of Kashmir. They say that last night in a bombing raid on Kabul, 22 of their members who were in a house in Kabul were killed. Now, this group is a group in the past that had been believed to be responsible for kidnapping 6 tourists in the Kashmir region in 1995. And again in 1999, this group was believed to have been responsible for hijacking an Indian Airlines aircraft. But they say their fighters had gone to Afghanistan in support of the Taliban. 22 of them were in a house in Kabul. That house was hit by a bomb and they all died. Now, our staff in Kandahar late Tuesday were told about the bombing of a village 62 kilometers northwest of Kandahar. They say they tried to get there but were unable to get there before nightfall, but what they were able to do was to go to the hospital in Kandahar and film some bodies. What they say they saw were burnt bodies, bodies that had large parts of the bodies missing. They said they saw an injured man in the hospital. A doctor there told them that the injured man had gunshot wounds in his back. They say, our staff there say, that survivors from the village and relatives of the dead told them that what happened was this village was bombed. They say that they could hear AC-130 gunships overnight. They say that the helicopters were heard, and also that there was a lot of small arms machine gun fire through the night. Now, the survivors told our staff that 93 people had been killed and 20 injured. Now, our staff weren't able to count that many bodies or even close to that in the hospital, but certainly they say that they were shown bodies of what appeared to be civilians, injured civilians, and people, relatives of the dead and wounded from that village, who said that there was some form of substantial attack on that village. Darren?
Nick, we have word that tribal leaders plan to meet today in Peshawar. What exactly are they discussing? What's on the table? And do we expect anything productive to come out of those meetings?
The meetings are expected to last several days. It's going to be tribal leaders, it's going to be Afghan political leaders who've been in exile for some time, some of them loyal to the exiled king. They're also going to be religious leaders, and what they're hoping to do is build a sort of political consensus among these groups. Now, a lot of them will be Pashtuns. That's the same ethnic group that the Taliban come from. That's the largest ethnic group inside Pakistan, the group that inside Afghanistan, rather, that's the group that the Pakistan government would like to see very well represented in any new political dispensation inside Afghanistan. But this group will be meeting to build a consensus, try and decide how they can be involved in any new government inside Afghanistan. That's a new government after the Taliban are removed. Darren?
Nick Robertson in Islamabad. Nick, thank you.
Correct. Coming up in 28 minutes after the hour, and we're going to change gears here and check out a domestic matter here in the U.S. The weather. Dave Hennon's here, and he says there may be some serious weather to talk about here today. So let's get a check of that, Dave.
Stirred up in the Midwest.
Yeah, good morning, Leon and Darren. Indeed, we do expect a round of severe thunderstorms, especially later on this afternoon, but already ongoing strong storms this morning. Parts of Michigan, you can see that we have this line of thunderstorms which has formed east now of Chicago, heading towards Detroit. This will be one in a number of rounds of strong to severe thunderstorms that are expected over much of the Midwest today. Detroit, just one of the cities that is expecting to see severe weather. There is what we call a high risk of severe thunderstorms. That does not happen all that often, only a couple of times a year. So a pretty significant outbreak of severe weather is expected today. There is a couple of cold fronts, moving through, one through the Ohio River Valley at the present time, another stronger cold front out to the west. That's the main front that will trigger the severe weather today, and behind that it's even snowing this morning in through parts of the Dakotas. Minneapolis expecting some snow during the overnight hours tonight. Here's the area we're watching, a slight risk of severe weather, the area highlighted in lighter red. This is the area we are most concerned about, though. Southern Michigan through Indiana, extending southward. Cities like Detroit and Toledo and Columbus and Cincinnati and Louisville need to keep a close eye to the sky today with widespread wind damage possible with some of these thunderstorms, and there is the potential as well for a few strong tornadoes today, especially within that high-risk area. So if you live in these areas, keep a close eye to the sky, especially this afternoon as those thunderstorms continue to develop. Elsewhere over the U.S. today, we are looking at rain into the Pacific Northwest today. I mentioned the snow, the rain-snow line expected to be right about there. So north of that into Minnesota are expecting snow, more significant rain further to the south. That's the latest on your weather. We'll keep you up to date on this dangerous weather day and be back with more of Daybreak 2 right after this.
Here now, the latest developments we have in America's war against terror. Afghan villagers say dozens of people have been killed or wounded in an attack by the U.S. forces. CNN staffers did see some body bags and wounded people who were being treated in a hospital in Kandahar, but the claim about an attack on a village 60 miles north of Kandahar could not be independently verified, as CNN could not reach that location before it got too dark over there.
U.S.-led airstrikes are pounding Taliban forces. Pentagon video shows direct hits on a Taliban command post and a tank near Mazar Sharif, where the U.S. is trying to help the Northern Alliance take that town from the Taliban. In Washington, President Bush says he's confident that he is safe at the White House. Mail workers at the White House and at an off-site mail processing center are being tested. They are also being given antibiotics as a precaution. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced by the fighting inside Afghanistan. Many refugees are trying to flee into Pakistan. But as our Satinder Bindra now tells us, tens of thousands are displaced actually right within Afghanistan itself.
Without a home in their own country, cooking and eating under the open skies, with only these flimsy tents as shelters from the searing heat in the summer and biting cold in the winter, meet the residents of Kojagar. They're here, but Kojagar lies a few hundred kilometers south. 15 months ago, fighting forced all 1,500 residents to flee their homes. Now they seek shelter in Northern Alliance territory. Taliban. When the Taliban stormed into our village, says Mauji Kal, there was a 14-year-old girl. The Taliban killed her, and then we escaped here. The walk into Northern Alliance territory, says the oldest person in this camp, 95-year-old Mauji Kal, took 3 days. Except for infants and toddlers who rode on donkey back, all these children walked. Our children are begging for bread and money to feed their families, says Mauji Kal. We have nothing to wear in the winter, and to cover the bare feet of our children, we have no way to rescue ourselves from this bad luck. Other than odd jobs, most of the men here say they can't find any work. This entire community is now dependent on handouts from relief agencies. To make matters worse, even the drinking water in these wells is saltish, and the nights are beginning to get very cold. Life just couldn't get worse. None of the children here attend school. Their only nourishment is a dry scrap of bread. Still, their smile for the cameras is friendly and warm, and for all their troubles, these people display a remarkable resilience. What stands out here is not poverty, but pride. Everyone here looks forward to going back to Kojagar so they can rebuild their homes, start cultivating their fields again. But first, the Taliban forces have to be defeated, and it's far from clear when that will happen. We can never return because our homes are under Taliban control, says Mauji Kal. We cannot go there till Northern Alliance troops capture it. 95-year-old Mauji Kal feels helpless. Every day, she says, feels like an eternity. Since she's too old to work, Mauji Kal spends her days cooking, but that only occupies her hands. Her mind spends all its time thinking of her 4 sons, all killed fighting the Taliban. Satinder Bindra, CNN, on the Kukcha River in northeastern Afghanistan.
Well, as the U.S.-led coalition picks up its airstrikes against Taliban forces, 2 big concerns on the horizon right now are the settling in of winter and the coming of the month of Ramadan, which is a holy month in Islam. And to talk about that and the implications of actually conducting some combat during that, we're joined from our London bureau this morning by Yanaya Bunglawala. He is a spokesman for the Muslim Council of Great Britain. And we thank you very much for your time this morning, because we have been drawn toward trying to learn more about Islam, as well as Islamic politics, if you will, in the wake of all of this action in Afghanistan. And so much has been said about concerns that perhaps fighting during Ramadan would actually cause a major problem amongst the Arab nations who are in the coalition right now, and who are at least providing some support. Now, to help us try to understand exactly why that is, can you explain, first of all, what exactly is Ramadan, if you were to explain that to an uninitiate like myself?
Sure. Ramadan is the 9th month in the Islamic calendar, and its main significance for Muslims resides in 2 areas. Firstly, it is the month when Muslims believe God revealed his final revelation to man 1400 years ago to Muhammad. During this month, in Islam, we believe God revealed his messages to many prophets, including the Torah to Moses and the Gospel to Jesus, and the Quran is the final revelation according to Islamic belief. Okay. So the revelation began during the month of Ramadan. Secondly, the Ramadan is the month of fasting for all Muslims all over the world. Throughout this month, Muslims from dawn till dusk, they abstain from food and drink. And it creates a really enormous feeling of togetherness all over the world during this month. All right. Well, so those are 2 main significances.
Okay, we understand. Thank you very much for that. Now, with that in mind, that is the backdrop here. Now, if Muslims would abstain from food and from drink during this period, does it mean that they should also be abstaining from fighting or from warring during that time? Because that question has not really been settled. As I understand it, there have been instances in history where there has been fighting during Ramadan amongst Muslims, and when there has not been fighting. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, certainly it's not forbidden to fight during the month of Ramadan. In fact, even at the time of the Prophet, there were battles during the month of Ramadan. The concerns that have been raised, though, here, because Afghanistan is a very, very poor nation. Remember, it doesn't have even the basics of a health system, basics of an education system. That if Muslims see, already there is, heightened feelings towards the Afghans throughout the Muslim world. But to see them being bombed during the month of Ramadan, when we should be helping the poor, we should be helping the needy, really we are afraid it will inflame passions all over the Muslim world.
You know, I heard the same thing 3 years ago when there were strikes underway in Iraq, and we were covering those, and we heard the same questions being raised about the coalition back then striking against Iraq during Ramadan. But yet and still, there have not been, at least I have not been aware of any recriminations amongst the Muslim world when there have been fighting. There's been fighting going on, say, in Algeria, where there's been a civil war waging for years amongst Muslims there. Is it a matter of perhaps that Muslims can fight amongst each other, but someone from the outside fighting against them is something that is definitely seen to be, I guess, something to be avoided, or something that could actually cause a big problem?
No, I mean, the principle here is the killing of innocents. The killing of innocents should be abhorred regardless of which month. But if it occurs during Ramadan, when Muslims, you know, as I said, there is an enormous feeling. Maybe you cannot appreciate if you're not Muslim, but the feeling is very heightened during this month. And if they see innocents, as we're getting reports now of hospitals, of the Red Cross buildings, homes for the elderly being bombed, which is really, you have to expect when the Americans are bombing from such high altitudes, and we warned that this would happen, that what will be the repercussions? And if we really want to deal with the issue of terrorism, then we need to remove the breeding grounds of terrorism, which lie in injustices around the world. And if we're going to create another injustice in Afghanistan, then, I mean, you can guess what will happen.
Yeah, let me ask you one final question, because it occurred to me as you were speaking here. What if Osama bin Laden's location was identified during Ramadan and a strike was carried out on just taking out him? Would there be recriminations amongst the Muslim world if that were to happen?
Osama was held in high regard, you must recall, because of his resistance to the Russian invasion. Now, if Osama is directly implicated with the horrific events of September the 11th, naturally Muslims will not feel sympathy for what happens to Osama. But it is important to convince Muslims of Osama's guilt of what happened on September 11th. You must be aware Muslims still are not clear about the guilt. For example, during Lockerbie, when we suspected the 2 Libyans of having carried out the Lockerbie bombing, we waited 10 years, but we did wait, and we brought them to trial, and we established their guilt, and now one of them is in prison. It is important to follow a legal procedure here.
And now at Bungawala, thank you very much for your insight this morning, and we appreciate the insight. This move was a condition of the 1998 Good Friday peace agreement. British Prime Minister Tony Blair says disarming the IRA means that there is room for other positive changes, like scaling back British military operations in Northern Ireland. Power-sharing agreements are also expected to be put back into action. President Bush says the people of Northern Ireland are now measurably closer to the lasting peace they richly deserve.
Now to Israel, which is ignoring President Bush's personal request to pull its troops and its tanks out of Palestinian-controlled areas of the West Bank. CNN's Mike Hanna is joining us with the latest. He is live in Jerusalem. Mike, hello.
Well, Darren, as you say, the demand that the Israeli forces withdraw from autonomous Palestinian areas immediately has been ignored. In fact, these Israeli operations have increased over the past 24 hours, with Israeli forces moving to yet another autonomous Palestinian area, Area A as it is referred to. That is an area which is purportedly under full Palestinian security and civil control. At least one person killed in that operation, a number of people reported to be injured, and Israeli forces have taken up positions in the village of Beit Rima. Overnight in the West Bank city of Bethlehem, there was ongoing conflict. This has been the epicenter of the conflict in response to the Israeli operations. There was exchanges of fire throughout the night. This has been the most extensive Israeli operation in Palestinian-controlled territory in a number of years. Israeli forces have moved into a number of West Bank cities and villages that before had been under full Palestinian control. This obviously condemned by the Palestinian Authority. Israel says that it is carrying out a mission. It says that the Palestinian Authority is not arresting known militants, and in particular those who carried out the assassination of an Israeli government minister exactly 1 week ago. The Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon says there is no intention for Israeli forces to remain in autonomous Palestinian territory, and once he says the mission has been completed, they will withdraw. However, the Palestinians continue to insist that this is a complete contravention of all previous signed agreements between the parties. They have called for an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to condemn the Israeli action. As many as 40 Palestinians have been killed in the past week that this operation has been ongoing. No casualties among the Israeli soldiers. 7 Israeli soldiers reported to have been injured, 1 of them seriously. So the situation on the ground remains critical. Israeli forces remain deployed.
NBC's Tom Brokaw, the other sent to the New York Post, appear to be identical. They have the same handwriting and they contain the same threatening message inside.
The U.S. Postal Service today will begin testing and treating thousands of postal workers in New York City for possible anthrax exposure. President Bush says
Good morning, I'm David Haffenreffer at the CNN Financial News Desk in New York with this business update. Wall Street appears poised for a positive open when trading kicks off a little bit later on this morning. Stock index futures are sharply higher, but that all could change in just a few hours' time. The defense sector today is one to watch. In a surprise move, the U.S. government is blocking General Dynamics' proposed takeover of Newport News Shipbuilding. In its lawsuit, the Justice Department says the merger would result in only one company making nuclear submarines. The Pentagon says it will back a rival bid by Northrop Grumman to acquire Newport News. On the earnings front, Amazon.com, AT&T, and Compaq Computer all released financial results which met expectations, but as usual, the news was mixed. Amazon warned fourth quarter sales would fall below expectations, but it did stick to its promise to deliver a profit. AT&T also met the street's forecasts, but profits plunged from a year ago, and Compaq Computer also expects weak sales and a loss.